Well, now, Mr. Speaker, in April of 2011, we're still waiting for that town's task force. Please. And so my question to the minister is this. Is this town's task force, which has not yet met on such an important matter, another example of an NDP broken promise, or is he afraid to meet with them after what he did to our towns a few weeks ago?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want the member opposite to be aware that I've had very good correspondence, dialogue, consultation with the UNSM and with municipalities, and actually have started my tour around the province to meet the wardens, mayors, and municipal units. The town task force is still a go, I must say. Actually, some municipalities have contributed to that. It's our commitment to see that through, and actually, I think many of the municipalities are very keen to that initiative, and we intend to follow through with a previous commitment to do that.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on your first supplementary, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sad to say this, but only in the NDP fantasy land is a task force that has not met in 2 years considered to be still a go. But having said that, the minister said at the time that he broke his agreement with the municipalities, quote, "We are not going to download our financial problems onto municipalities." Well, I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the minister, that municipal officials, including Annapolis County Warden Reg Ritchie, would beg to disagree. Mr. Ritchie told the Annapolis County Spectator, and I quote, that it's not fair that our residents have to pay the price for the province's downloading of costs. And of course, the warden is correct. And so my question to the minister is this: why does this government continue to force its financial hardships onto the backs of others, including, in this case, our municipalities?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, within days of me becoming the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, I met with the President of the UNSM. His comment to me was, we expect some things will change. They were looking at the world as we saw it, that we were asking for commitments from education and other sectors. So, Mr. Speaker, I did make one commitment to him, that if it was possible to give the 1-year notice before we made any changes that might negatively impact municipalities financially, which was the thing he said, can we keep the 1-year notice? I said, as much as it's possible for me to do that I would try to do that. That was the one thing that I committed to do with him. And Mr. Speaker, not only is that the one thing I delivered, but we delivered much more to the municipalities. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this has been a very productive question period. We're actually learning some things from the government today. One of the things that I think we've just learned from the minister is you should never say to an NDP minister, we expect some things to change, because you can be sure you're about to get your pockets picked if that's what you say to a minister of this government, and it's our municipalities that have learned that lesson in this case. And so my final question to the minister is this: will he agree that as property taxes go up, as they inevitably will as a result of his actions as minister, that this amounts to another hidden NDP tax increase in the wings?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, Mr. Speaker, I have to say that the municipalities, I think, have been quite reasonable on this. The member opposite should remember yesterday's question period, since I would have thought it was quite productive, since I indicated the clause in the MOU that showed that the municipalities had agreed that if the province could not meet that financial commitment, that they wouldn't have to. That's basically, it was based on appropriation. Mr. Speaker, the province signed an MOU, not an IOU.
The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I ask my question, could I ask the Minister to table the documents that she referred to regarding other research that included reading recovery? Mr. Speaker, my question through you to the Minister of Education is this. Teachers from across this province have been asked to work with the Minister to develop a replacement for reading recovery. So my question to the Minister is this. Will this replacement be both research and evidence-based?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and yes.
The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Programs like Reading Recovery and other literacy intervention programs have taken years to develop, to research, to develop, to pilot, to implement, and to assess. We're now 5 months away from the opening of school in September 2011. Teachers have been working to develop a program that will replace Reading Recovery. So my question to the Minister is this. Will the Minister please explain how she plans to research, develop, pilot, implement, and assess a new program before September?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. And I think that I would like to clarify that Reading Recovery is a program. It is one piece of a balanced literacy initiative. Thank you. Now, what I would like to say, not using the word program, we're looking at a new approach. Now, I know that the member opposite knows that the members, the staff within the Department of Education have the expertise to make the recommendations without any consultation. We could have been able to put something in place quite quickly, but one of the things that this province has is diversity among our school boards. And also, this government is very clear that we want to collaborate with our partners. So instead of the department putting another approach in place to encompass reaching more children to have success with literacy, we asked members, their lead teachers from the different school boards to come together so that we could make sure that we were planning an approach that would be going out into the school boards based on best practice, research, evidence-based. And I have to say that the members that came in from across the province to work, we're ending up with an approach that is going to be a better approach than we've ever had, because it is something that we worked on together. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Colchester North on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do understand Reading Recovery fairly well. I do understand that there are experts at the department. I do understand that there are teachers in the classroom who know a lot about literacy programs, and I do understand they've been called in and they're extremely frustrated. So in my correspondence to the Minister, I did write to the Minister on February 24th. I will table that letter, and the Minister did respond to my correspondence. I appreciate that. I asked the Minister, and my quote was, would she reconsider the decision to discontinue Reading Recovery until such time as a replacement program that produces the same results or better can be found? So my question to the Minister is this. What comfort do parents and teachers have that a program that's pulled together in less than 5 months, ready for implementation, will give the same outcomes as Reading Recovery or any research evidence-based program?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I must say that I am looking forward to a program that is going to meet more than 43% of the children that have had success with Reading Recovery. And those were a few children, the lowest 20% of the grade 1 classroom. We're looking at broadening that out to capture children early so that they have success with literacy. Having the ability to be a good reader is a key component of being successful in life, and we want to make sure that we're getting our children early and that we're able to support them throughout. Reading Recovery was not meeting enough of the needs of the children that we have in our school.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, we know that the last-ditch efforts to save Holy Angels High School have fallen on deaf ears. It's unfortunate this government has chosen other priorities in the spring budget, like growing the size of bureaucracy, rather than saving Holy Angels High and its specialized programs that were so important to the students who chose to go there. Now, Mr. Speaker, as the students, teachers and parents prepare to close this chapter and transition to new schools, they need clarity in order to start to heal from the turmoil and chaos they've been put through. Mr. Speaker, through you, my question to the Minister of Education is, what will the Minister do to ease the anxiety of parents and students? And what process will be used to determine which students get to go to which high schools?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With respect to the member opposite, that's not a question that I can answer. That is a question that if he would be able to ask the school board, and I'm quite sure that they will be able to give him great comfort in the transition that they are putting in place for our 300 young women, well, I would imagine maybe 200 young women that will be transitioning back within their community schools. But I wouldn't be able to answer that, but I know that the school board is working on making sure that that goes as seamlessly as possible.
The Honourable Member for Victoria Lakes on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you'd think that the department would be anxious to know that the children were looked after as well. Mr. Speaker, the students at Holy Angels chose to travel from communities all around Cape Breton Island to the all-girls school for its program, culture and learning environment. Now they're fearful that their right to choose which high school they want to attend will be taken away. Sources say that one high school principal in the area has been very vocal that all students from Holy Angels High should be required to go to his school. Some people involved feel the principal sees this as an opportunity to raise his student numbers rather than what's best for these girls. So, Mr. Speaker, my question through you to the Minister is, will the Minister put the students' interests first and encourage the school board to allow the students to choose which school they want to attend?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. I want to say that all students in our province are important to this government and to this minister. And there are processes in place at the school board that I will not interfere with. It is up to the school board to make those decisions, and I know they will make good decisions with each of the students.
The Honourable Member for Victoria Lakes on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, proof that this government has left the girls in Holy Angels hanging out to dry. Mr. Speaker, some of the teachers at Holy Angels High are fearful they'll not find work for the fall. It's especially concerning for those ones who have been teaching highly specialized programs that are the modern design of the traditional teaching practices pioneered by the sisters over a century ago. So my final supplementary, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Minister is, what will be done to help teachers find meaningful employment in their specialized teaching fields so they're not just another percentage point on the growing unemployment rate in Cape Breton?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm finding it a little unfair for the member opposite to ask me questions which need to be directed to the school board. And I know the school board will be able to answer those questions. The school board has processes in place, and the collective agreement will kick in. I want to say that the students at that school will have a very good education and a good experience in other schools. Unfortunately, the sisters decided that they were not going to lease the building anymore, and we have to respect their decision. I feel very badly that some of our young people in Cape Breton will have a little bit of a disruption in their schooling, but we did everything that we could, but we have to be respectful of, one, the process, and we have to be respectful of the decision that the sisters made.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question today is also for the Minister of Education, and it involves the same topic as the previous member brought up to the Minister. And this particular question does not involve the school board, it involves the government of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, the NDP government has not stepped in to buy Holy Angels High School. This school is known for the high academic achievements of its students and is the only public school of its kind east of Montreal. And Mr. Speaker, the Premier, in his place in this House, killed any thought of the government buying Holy Angels High School and keeping it open. Instead, what we're witnessing now is the spectacle of parents in the Sydney and area running around the community trying to get a private citizen, any private citizen, to buy the school so it can be retained by the school board as an all-girls high school. How shameful is that, Mr. Speaker, in a public school system where the parents of these children who are going to that school have to go around the community trying to get a private sector person to buy a school? My question to the minister, will you reconsider your decision to buy Holy Angels?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. No.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Well, at least, Mr. Speaker, she didn't blame the school board. The blame rests with the government. The government has chosen to abandon Holy Angels, the only all-girls high school. The government could have bought that school, Mr. Speaker, for $750,000. And after the finance minister and the premier standing in their place here in the last few days and telling Nova Scotians what a wonderful surplus we had, they can't find $750,000 to keep the girls in Holy Angels High in a school of their own. Now, Mr. Speaker, that to me is shameful. That tells me that this government is not concerning itself with the provision of quality education in an all-girls high school in Sydney. My question, again, to the Minister of Education, why has your government decided to abandon the all-girls high school at Holy Angels in Sydney?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to say that this government did work with the school board, and they looked at many options around Holy Angels. And I know that there was a committee struck and that the deputy met with them on a number of occasions, and we offered extra money around the lease situation. But the school board, they're the ones that decide which schools are presented to the government for our capital plan. And this is not a blame game, Mr. Speaker. We have got to realize that we have to respect those young women as they go into our different schools, to support them. And let's stop talking about something that we have now no control over. We need to respect the sisters and the decision that they've made.
For Cape Breton South.
Speaker, it's got nothing to do with the decision of the sisters not to lease the school. It's got everything to do with the government abandoning the concept of an all-girls high school east of Montreal, a public school. That's what this is all about. And it's not a school board problem. The demise of Holy Angels is the responsibility of this government. This government has caused the demise of Holy Angels because of its refusal to buy the school. You know, Madam Minister, that the school board cannot buy capital assets. It has to be the government of the day to purchase those assets. And I'm asking you again, for the people of Cape Breton who depend on Holy Angels to keep operating, to the people who want to keep going in that school of excellence, will you change your mind and buy that school for $750,000 and keep those students in an all-girls high school in Sydney?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. The young women of Holy Angels High have had enough turmoil, and they know that the decision has been made, and the school board is already making plans around where they're being relocated. Mr. Speaker, really, we need to be able to support the young women as they make their transition, to make sure that they're successful in that transition. And this issue, Mr. Speaker, is something that we need to move on and make sure that we are providing education for those girls in other schools in their communities. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health and Wellness. As the minister may recall, last fall, the Minister of Health and Wellness, along with her provincial counterparts, urged the federal government to fund clinical trials for the MS liberation treatment. To date, the federal government has failed to act. As a result, we have a patchwork of activity happening across the country. Saskatchewan is funding their own clinical trial. New Brunswick provides support for patients traveling out of country for treatment. Newfoundland funded MRIs for patients traveling abroad and tracking patients. And yesterday, Manitoba joined the cause by announcing it will be joining Saskatchewan in funding clinical trials. My question to the minister is, can the minister update the House as to what discussions she has had with her counterparts with regard to participation in MS clinical trials?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, currently in this country, there are no clinical trials underway in any province. However, there are 7 pieces of research happening throughout North America that an expert scientific panel put together by the federal government under the auspices of CIHI are watching very carefully and monitoring. And this research from these 7 projects is the research that will form the basis of whether or not clinical trials will proceed and on what basis. And we're awaiting the outcome of the results of those 7 studies.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the absence of leadership at the federal level, provinces are stepping up to the plate to assist MS patients in their respective jurisdictions. Nova Scotia MS patients deserve the same consideration from their own government. The Manitoba NDP government announced yesterday they will fund a clinical trial in their province. They've put $5 million aside to start that, and they've also invited other provinces to join in on a multi-site research proposal on MS liberation treatment. My question to the minister is, will this NDP government consider the request being issued by the NDP government in Manitoba and join in a multi-site clinical trial for the MS liberation treatment?
The Honourable Minister for Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have said, and I will say again here today, that when the scientific and medical experts recommend that clinical trials proceed, our province will certainly be happy to participate in them.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this government talks about evidence. Good, solid evidence in medicine is gathered by participating in a clinical trial. Last fall, the Premier stated in the House that he is prepared to participate in national clinical trials. And, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just table that while we're here. The Premier in Manitoba, Premier Selinger's call yesterday was the beginning of what will no doubt become a national clinical trial. My question this time is to the Premier, Mr. Speaker. Is the Premier willing to stand by his words last fall and ensure Nova Scotia participates in a clinical trial for MS liberation treatment?
Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I said what I meant. I mean what I said.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my questions today will be for the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Affairs. Mr. Speaker, to quote a former opposition critic who now sits as Finance Minister, this government is obsessed with appearances rather than realities, and that was stated in Hansard, April 23, 2001. That statement has never been more appropriate than it is today. This is a government that writes friction as an excuse to hike taxes. This is a government which tries to rewrite history in order to justify reneging on agreements. And this government has tried to use clever wordsmithing to cover up their true intentions. My question is, how much more property taxes will Nova Scotians be forced to pay now that you're downloading your responsibilities on the municipal councils?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Well, a couple of things there, Mr. Speaker. We're not downloading on municipalities. We're stopping the uploading to the province. The opposition, Mr. Speaker, doesn't have to like the answer. They could listen to it. The municipalities have been budgeting these costs into their budgets over the past few years, so there will be no increase in taxes for Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Preston on your first supplementary.
I trust the minister is going to guarantee that, and if there is a tax increase, that he will cover them. Somehow or other, I don't believe that. Mr. Speaker, not only is this government failing to address the problems throughout the municipalities in Nova Scotia, they're going to download provincial commitments onto these communities and to these people. This minister knows full well that he stood against provincial downloading when he was in opposition. Yet here we are again, another broken NDP promise and another NDP tax hike on the horizon. And when Nova Scotia property taxes go up, and the NDP do exactly what the finance minister tried to do yesterday, wash his hands and claim, not me. My question is to the minister, when property taxes go up across the province because of their recklessness, will you and the finance minister apologize for Nova Scotia for yet another NDP broken promise and tax hike?
The Honourable Minister for Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, this government didn't break any promises, and I certainly know that this minister hasn't. And the member opposite, if he remembers question period yesterday and looks and answered, he will see that there was a clause in the MOU that said the agreement was based on appropriation, which I'm thinking he would understand means that if the government could not afford it, that was an out clause really for the government in this regard. Mr. Speaker, he would know from the finances left to us by the previous administration who entered the agreement that was not a sustainable agreement. I cannot guarantee to the member that municipalities will not raise taxes, but what I can tell them is they will not raise taxes because of any change in the MOU.
The Honourable Member from Preston on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, all municipalities will be impacted when the province downloads the responsibilities as they're doing now. The NDP might be able to invent surpluses one day and invent deficits the next day, but Nova Scotians know that their taxes are going up. 2% higher GST, 1,400 higher user fees, more and more income being taxed at a higher and higher rate due to bracket creep. And Nova Scotians can expect higher property taxes thanks to the NDP. My question is, how is downloading your commitments onto the municipality a better deal for anyone in Nova Scotia other than the Minister of Finance?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'll try to make a couple of points which I'm pretty sure will not resonate with the member. The government is not downloading onto the municipalities. It is stopping the uploading to the government, Mr. Speaker. The municipalities are actually better off under these adjustments than they were prior to the MOU. Perhaps not as well off as they might have hoped if the MOU had been completed, but they're better off than they were prior to the MOU. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the government announced changes to the student assistance plan, and that was a good thing. And you knew that was coming. There's no indication that the government is going to help students who want to pursue a second degree or a professional or graduate degree. So my question is to the Minister of Advanced Education. What new assistance are you giving graduate or professional students?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was very pleased to meet with student leaders yesterday and also at an event last evening. And their almost unanimous reaction to the investment of the government into making university education more affordable was very, very positive. And we're very pleased to move that forward. As everyone in this House recognizes, a university education is a great investment, and it continues to pay off through an individual's lifetime. And certainly there are some programs and degrees that enable students to earn more in their future careers. Certainly we needed to start and focus on those who, we wanted to make it affordable for those who had most need, and that's what we've accomplished to an improved extent, and we're very, very excited about this breakthrough. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is not the only way the government is neglecting students who are continuing their studies. Undergrad tuition will be limited to increases of not more than 3%, but it appears tuition in professional programs will be able to rise with no limits. So my question is, why?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We took a very balanced, measured approach. We replaced the $30 million that was required to continue the bursary for students in this province. We capped tuition at 3%, and we improved significantly the student assistance package. I think students got a very good break, and they certainly realize that. Can we do more in the future? Hopefully, but my heavens, this is in this fiscal reality. Making these improvements was a tremendous break for everyone, and we're very pleased to be able to support the youth of our province.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I take from the minister's comments that what we're going to do is penalize our brightest and our best, the kids who are going on to do master's degree and professional's degrees, by not giving them any assurance what their tuition is going to be. They don't know where their tuition is going at this point. Well, they only know it's going to go up. And Mr. Speaker, the people who want to pursue professional or graduate degrees will improve our economy for the better. You know, that educated workforce that we all keep hearing about. Students should not be limited to one degree based on socioeconomic status. Will the minister commit to treating all students fairly and reconsider her approach to professional and graduate students?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our first priority is giving university students or the citizens of Nova Scotia the opportunity to at least get their first degree in an affordable manner. And we've certainly done that. With the graduate and professional programs, certainly the citizens of this province subsidize those programs considerably. That is a tremendous contribution from the citizens. We need to make sure that we have sustainable and quality education system in our post-secondary system, and this approach is one way to maintain that sustainability. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. According to the 2009 Program for International Student Assessment, released December 7, 2010, 15-year-olds in Nova Scotia were ranked 13th in the world in reading, a significant achievement from the past, since they were 10 years ago. The study measured students from 65 countries and included the 10 Canadian provinces. Mr. Speaker, my question through you to the Minister of Education, can she explain why she's willing to risk the significant progress and achievements made in literacy in our province by eliminating the Reading Recovery Program without a clear strategy or goals on how she plans to keep children at the lowest literacy rates from falling through the cracks?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for reminding people in Nova Scotia how well we are doing it with our education system. It's a world-class system, and all Nova Scotians should be very proud of that. I want to say that the reason that Reading Recovery is being replaced with a new approach is that we need to make sure that we meet the needs of more children, and so we are going to be making sure that we are going to be having early intervention. We need to catch our children early if they need support learning how to read. So, therefore, Mr. Speaker, the lowest 20% of a class in Reading Recovery that would be picked up, those are the very few numbers. We're looking at making sure that we are going to be able to even have better scores because we're picking up kids younger and earlier.
The Honourable Member for Argyll on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, we know the research-based reading recovery program has been around since the 1970s. The program is ranked #1 out of 153 reading programs in the U.S. and is proven to be very successful in bridging the literacy gap between a classroom's most struggling students and their peers. Through you to the Minister, how in 5 months will you research, develop, test, train, and implement a new reading program that can even come close to comparing with reading recovery, and what the real cost of the program, including the loss of human capital already invested in the reading recovery program?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The approach that we are taking is to make sure that we are using the best practices in terms of literacy development. We have over 600 trained reading recovery teachers in the province of Nova Scotia that know those best practices. Learning how to read comes with a lot of research. We know what children need to be successful in reading, and I am looking forward to, in another couple of weeks, to be able to share with my members opposite the approach that we are taking. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Argyll on your final supplementary.
Well, I thank the Minister for that answer and wanting to provide the information to us. She said she wants to expand the program to include students from grade 1 to grade 3, and that different boards have different needs, from primary to grade 3. Thank you. How does she plan to monitor this piecemeal program if it's going to be different in different boards and it's going to be such a broader piece, to make sure that students are not falling farther behind and ending up with IPPs or individual program plans, which closes doors on them when they get to higher grades and will further cost the government in the future when it could have been prevented in the first place?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to remind the member opposite, who I know has a deep understanding of reading recovery. Reading recovery was only meeting the needs of very few students, the lowest 20% of a grade 1 class, and not all of that 20%. And we are now able to prove that only 43% of the children, by the time they get to grade 3, are attaining the goals that we want them to have. So we are going to make sure that this program gets children early, and evidence-based, research-based tells us earlier is better. We don't want to wait to grade 1 to catch a few. We want to get in early and catch more children so we can support them with their reading so they can be successful. And thank you very much for the question, member opposite.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Energy. I'm sure the Minister is aware that the current residential electricity price is 11.8 cents a kilowatt hour, and of course to that we add the base rate in the NDP electricity tax. Mr. Speaker, we all know that power rates will continue to rise with the reliance on fossil fuels and the costs associated with the renewables. Mr. Speaker, would the Minister please tell this House what price he believes Nova Scotians should expect electricity prices to level off at?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. We're in Nova Scotia. We're on the leading edge of some renewable electricity initiatives, and but the rates actually are set by the Utility and Review Board. So actually, the UARB is meeting right this week on the COMFIT program, as the honourable member would know, and so really that's their responsibility, and only time will tell what rates they set.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised to hear the Minister of Energy say that it's not his responsibility, since the Premier and the Minister of Finance in opposition repeatedly said it was the government's responsibility to ensure fair power rates for Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Energy mentioned the COMFIT hearing, and let me just speak to that briefly. You know, we all agree that renewable energy is part of the solution. However, he's constantly deferring to the Utility and Review Board, just as this government is. And as he noted, one such deferral goes on today with the feed-in tariff hearings, a program which excludes solar and geothermal because the NDP said it would be too expensive. And yet, we have rates proposed at that hearing today which are 6 times what Nova Scotians pay for electricity now. Mr. Speaker, the legislation on the feed-in tariff does not allow the board to consider affordability or even the economics of various projects. So, Mr. Speaker, please. Does the minister still support the review board setting feed-in tariff rates at levels which could prove unaffordable to Nova Scotia residents and businesses?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UARB has a job to do. That's certainly true, and you know, they have the expertise. They bring in knowledgeable experts on helping to determine the rates. But really, the ComFit is really all about communities. It's ComFit, Community Feed-in Tariff, is what it stands for, and it allows farmers groups, it allows municipalities, it allows small businesses and community groups to get involved, and it helps create jobs in our local communities, and the spin-off, whether you know it's tidal or in-stream or wind or whatever process they're moving forward. So there's a lot of potential in it. It's going to help stabilize energy prices over time, and we're saying let the UARB fully investigate it and bring in the proper rates.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, and I might congratulate the Minister for his early learning of avoiding and not answering the questions that are embarrassing for his government, as he's done so ably today. Mr. Speaker, he says community. I wonder how many people in his party consider Lockheed Martin and some of those large ones community, because they obviously qualify. Mr. Speaker, the URB has stated, and the chair of the URB has stated, that they can only consider the items that this government has put before them and only consider those conditions. So because the NDP didn't include affordability or economics in it, they can't consider it. So, Mr. Speaker, the Premier said, the now Premier said in opposition, and I quote, increases will make life less affordable for every family in the province, and these increases will affect jobs as Nova Scotia industries struggle to remain competitive. Please. That hasn't changed. So, Mr. Speaker, my question is, given that what we now see at the review board hearings and the fact that the NDP legislation did not factor in affordability and project economics, will the Minister of Energy tell us why his government no longer cares about affordability or competitiveness?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the ComFit program is really for small community groups to develop energy projects in the province. If larger companies like Lockheed Martin want to investigate, it's under the IPP program, as the Honourable Member should be aware. But really, we're all about bringing the best possible rates on electricity to Nova Scotians, cleaner, greener energy, and a more stable future. And that's why we took the HST off of electricity to begin with.
The Honourable Member from Halifax, Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health and Wellness. Earlier this week, the Canadian Diabetes Association issued another warning call to government that diabetes is at epidemic proportions, and failing to respond will impact future generations and severely threaten the sustainability of our healthcare system. Nova Scotia is definitely being swept up in this epidemic. The report, titled Canada at the Tipping Point, Charting a New Path, indicates that Nova Scotia ranks close to the top when it comes to diabetes prevalence, but very near the bottom when it comes to approving drugs and devices to better manage the disease. I think we would all agree, Mr. Speaker, that making improvements so we can reverse these rankings will not only benefit those with diabetes, it will go a long way to curbing the rising costs of health care. My question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister is, what plan does the Minister have to ensure Nova Scotia does a better job at managing diabetes?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Honourable Member for an excellent question. Mr. Speaker, our Better Care Sooner plan will contribute to improvements in chronic disease management. That's the whole point of having good primary care teams available in the communities, readily accessible to people, so that they can get to see them before conditions deteriorate to the point that they need more intense interventions in acute care settings. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, it is our plan, and the member will have seen this in the budget, to have a chronic disease management work done in this year. Some money has been allocated for that. And of course, our childhood obesity strategy will be looking at the health of children who are increasingly confronted with the disease of diabetes.
The honourable member from Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, I think that it's important that under the Chronic Disease Management Plan, the incidence of diabetes be looked at specifically and the benefit of the insulin pumps be looked at. I think that that's a key component. Mr. Speaker, it's estimated the hospitalization costs related to diabetes in Nova Scotia cost our healthcare system $38 million a year, and the total cost of managing diabetes is much higher. If we're able to prevent hospitalizations through better disease management, we're going to save the healthcare system money. My question to the Minister is, can the Minister please confirm whether she has been made aware of any plans in her own department to fund insulin pumps, starting with children under the age of 18?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know we'll have an opportunity to debate this further with a bit more detail following question period, and I'm looking forward to participating in that. But Mr. Speaker, there are many things that we can do to improve the management of diabetes, and we will be looking at all of those various components as we work on the childhood obesity strategy, and I will be happy to share those with those initiatives with members when we have fully developed those initiatives.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister is talking about the obesity strategy, and that is one measure of prevention, but we're talking about management of the disease, and not all diabetics have any problem with obesity. So we have to be careful not to lump those two things together. Mr. Speaker, in Nova Scotia, we have got a diabetic care program, which provides a network of diabetic care centres across the province and would provide an excellent platform for implementing an insulin pump program. In fact, we're in an enviable position compared to other provinces in this regard. So my question to the Minister is, when will the Minister commit to the creation of a diabetic management plan in Nova Scotia, which would include the provision of insulin pumps?
Order, please. I would remind all members during question period that all electronic devices are to be turned off at all times, and I'd appreciate if everybody would attain to those rules, please. Thank you. The Honourable Minister for Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with respect to insulin pumps, Nova Scotia is one of probably 5 or 6 provinces that do not provide coverage for insulin pumps. There are right now a very small number of our provinces, our larger provinces, that have some coverage, but they don't have universal coverage. They have small programs, and we certainly are monitoring the impact in those provinces of those programs. And if the honourable member has any information that indicates that there are cost savings, that it does result in fewer hospitalizations, I'd be very interested in seeing that information, because as of yet, my understanding is that information has not been generated by the provinces that in fact do have the insulin pumps.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Energy. As you know, the Bayplex Recreation Centre in Glace Bay is the home base of my community. For some time now, representatives of the Bayplex have been lobbying all levels of government for funding for its geothermal energy retrofit project. The federal government has committed its share of funding, Mr. Speaker. The municipality has also committed to a portion of the funding. So my question to the Minister, will the provincial government commit to funding the Bayplex geothermal project?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. I do believe I received a letter from you within the recent past and asking about this project. Every year, our program under Efficiency Nova Scotia looks at a number of rinks and other projects around the province, and each zone was managed at that time. And this year, I think it was HRM and Hants County that were in the program, and another year it'll be another area of the province. So, you know, it'll be considered in due course.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This project is much more than a simple rink project. It has many other angles and points that I think have to be taken into account. It's certainly a pioneering initiative that could serve as a benchmark for geothermal capabilities in this province. And everything hinges on the provincial government's commitment financially. Since the NDP had told Nova Scotians this week that they have the skill and intelligence to run a surplus of $447 million, I think the people of Glace Bay would love this skill and intelligence applied to our community project. So my question to the Minister of Energy, given the great financial windfall the government has spent the last few days talking about, would the Minister support my argument that a project involving renewable energies in a struggling economic region should land high on the government's priority list?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly, we're all interested in saving dollars in renewable energy is the cleaner, greener way to go, and we've got a number of good programs originally under Conserve Nova Scotia, but as of the 1st of April now under Efficiency Nova Scotia. And as that new entity moves forward, there will be a number of new initiatives looked at, and certainly your geothermal project in Glace Bay, it sounds interesting. I'd certainly be interested in getting more information on it.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Bayplex geothermal retrofit is certainly in line with the government's mandate. It capitalizes on a renewable resource. It allows the government to maximize federal investment. Okay. It supports and promotes healthy, active lifestyles and recreation. It allows a community nonprofit organization to become sustainable as this project pays for itself in 10 years. Good. It's a small investment relative to the return, and it shows a community that the provincial government has not forgotten about them. So my question to the Minister, I just listed 7 reasons why the government should support the Bayplex geothermal project. Please tell me one reason why the government shouldn't.
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, your project sounds interesting, and Efficiency Nova Scotia, as you know, is an arm's length organization to government, and certainly I'd be interested in getting more information personally, but I also suggest that you bring it directly to Efficiency Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Minister of Communities, Culture and Heritage. Mr. Speaker, the Premier with great fanfare has created this new department, and the Minister has announced plans to create Arts Nova Scotia, which has been well received across the province. My question through you, Mr. Speaker, when the Minister met with the arts community to reveal these plans, did he bother tell them he was about to cut arts funding for the 2nd time in 2 years? Oh.
The Honourable Minister of Communities, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member opposite for the question today. Of course, I'm not going to get into details about numbers on the budget because it is my first question, and I don't want you as Speaker to have me take my place, Mr. Speaker.
Good move. Good move.
But
I'd say that was a good move.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But the creation of the Department of Communities, Culture and Heritage, Mr. Speaker, broadens the focus of protecting and celebrating the Nova Scotia diverse culture and heritage that we have in the province, Mr. Speaker, and especially the arts community, Mr. Speaker. I was proud to have the Premier with me on the announcement back in February of our 5-point plan, arts and culture plan, Mr. Speaker, and I could tell the member opposite that the arts community was this information from the arts community community this information was well received by the arts community throughout Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to working with them to unfold that 5-point plan in the coming months, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Victoria Lakes on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister, welcome aboard. Mr. Speaker, we value the rich heritage of this province, and we value the cultural industry that's worth $1.4 billion to the Nova Scotian economy. So it outraged us when the government cut funding for culture last year by 10.5%, revealing it doesn't appreciate our heritage or understand their economy. But now they've lopped off another 1.3% for the coming fiscal year. So my question through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, why is this government one day courting the arts community with new organisations and the next day punishing them with funding cuts?
The Honourable Minister, Communities, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for his second question about this important issue, Mr. Speaker. One of the things that we have taken, Mr. Speaker, I think it's a loud message that we have indicated to Nova Scotians how important we feel this sector is to Nova Scotians. By the creation of this new department, Mr. Speaker, we're going to ensure that the creative economy has a positive effect on the economy of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, especially in rural communities. The creative economy is so important, and it doesn't have to take place in our major cities like Halifax or Sydney, Mr. Speaker. It happens all over the province, Mr. Speaker, in the members' opposite ridings, in the ridings of Yarmouth and Sydney, all across this province, Mr. Speaker. We're going to work with the sector to ensure that they have the support to continue to increase and support the creative economy here in Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Victoria Lakes on your final supplementary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government has been paying too much attention to the administration side of this department, not enough to actually developing the artistic community here. Last year, we had an expensive consultation exercise. Here's a bit of a show. This year, we have the creation of all these new departments and agencies, but the needs of artists, art organizations, creative businesses are being ignored. Arts funding here is such a small item, Mr. Speaker, $9.2 million, and governs such a massive industry worth $1.4 billion, that these cuts make no economic sense. So my final question through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, will the Minister promise to pay more attention to artists and to bureaucratic structures?
The Honourable Minister of Communities, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can tell the honourable member across the way that in my short 3 months of being in this overseeing this department, Mr. Speaker, that I've spent a lot more and have addressed many more issues than the previous government, Mr. Speaker. We'll be able to stand on our track record, Mr. Speaker. We know what the former government has done to the arts community over the years, Mr. Speaker. We're working with them, Mr. Speaker, not working against them.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, running short on time, so let's move along. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, scientists from around the world tried to explain to this government that a bounty on coyotes wouldn't work to effectively reduce contact between their population and ours. So I guess, Mr. Speaker, we'll have to ask the Minister, now that the bounty has ended, did it work?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. Our coyote program was multifaceted, included education, it included hiring trappers to pursue aggressive animals, it included the pelt incentive program, and it basically is an outreach in several directions, but basically to try to make the animals more wary of the human population. And really the season for licensed fur trappers only ended on March 31st, and it's a little early yet to see those results, but as they come in, we'll assess and monitor what happened and decide from there.
The honourable member from Kings West on your first supplementary.
Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the Minister knows full well that the effect that the bounty will have on numbers is only temporary. The best example of this is the fact that we tried this in the 80s, and it didn't work. Liberal caucus tried to explain this to the previous minister for the last year, Mr. Speaker, so maybe we'll try with the new minister. My question, will the bounty on coyotes be extended and start again in 2011?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is actually not a bounty, where a bounty is year-round, open to anybody and everybody to go after an animal. This is a targeted program. It's called a pelt incentive. It was only by licensed trappers. No one else could go after the animals, and it was only during the season from mid-October till the end of March. And it's too early yet to know whether the program worked, but it will be evaluated as the results come in.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, you know, the NDP sanitized the cull is what we had. Mr. Speaker, I understand the anxiety and caution people feel about coyotes close to residential population, but this is not a new phenomenon. The NDP government recklessly had a knee-jerk reaction to a situation and can't prove to us whether or not the bounty worked. My question to the minister, when will you show the House the figures on the coyote bounty from last year?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, as the results are available, we'll make them available to all Nova Scotians, including here in the House. But it's really part of our incentive to find a way to keep Nova Scotia safer, not to have an aggressive animal in our communities that are harmful to children or teenagers or adults. And really, the pelt incentive was part of that, but so is the education program, so is hiring licensed trappers to deal with aggressive animals, and we also hired a biologist, a specialist in the field, to provide advice. Safety is the number one issue.
Order, please. The time for oral questions put by members to minister has elapsed. I will now recognize the House Leader for the official opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would you please call Resolution 134?
I will now call Resolution 134, Diabetics Action Plan. I will now recognize the member from Halifax, Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's my pleasure to rise today on behalf of the Liberal caucus to discuss Resolution 134. And I would like to just read the operative clause in that resolution. And that is, therefore be it resolved that all members of the legislature recognize the devastating impact of diabetes on individuals and our healthcare system, and call on government to follow the lead of New Brunswick by outlining a diabetic action plan in our province, starting with the funding of insulin pumps. And Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, as you know, today we had a question period about insulin pumps, and the minister was able to answer and say that she's looking for evidence that insulin pumps save money, or that insulin pumps are effective in stopping or decreasing hospitalization and emergency room visits. And I would suggest that in the last couple of days, the minister has received many letters and emails from Nova Scotians who have told us their stories, and I know I've received them, and the health critic for the Conservative Party as well has been receiving these letters, and people are telling us of their personal experience with the pumps. And I've heard from a number of families where they can actually tell you their visits to emergency rooms are down, their security in managing the disease is up, their lifestyle is improved, their children are able to have a fuller, more confident experience at school and in the community, because they have that confidence of knowing that they have an insulin pump that is helping them, not doing everything, but helping them to manage the disease more effectively. So I think it's important that we acknowledge the efforts of Nova Scotians to explain to us what it means to live with diabetes and what it means in the long run to the province as well. The facts, of course, were in the report I mentioned that was just released by the Canadian Diabetes Association. It was at the tipping point. It was called Tipping Point on Diabetes. And in that report, they laid out what the current effects are, really, of not managing the disease properly. Number one, I thought, in terms of importance to Nova Scotia, was that we are close to the the very bottom when it comes to managing the disease through medications, devices, and supplies. And we are also near the very top when it comes to the incidence or prevalence of diabetes in this province. Now, I think it's important during this debate to note that the side effects of failing to properly manage the disease include heart attacks, stroke, kidney failure, blindness, non-traumatic limb amputation, and depression. And those costs are significant to every province in this country, but particularly here in Nova Scotia, where the numbers are high. The cost to treat these side effects, Madam Speaker, the cost to treat these side effects is much higher than the cost to government to try and prevent them in the first place by giving Nova Scotians all of the available tools that they can have to manage the disease successfully. Let's be very clear, Madam Speaker, that having access to insulin pumps is an investment for the province. It's an investment in good health. It's an investment in the Nova Scotians themselves and their families who are struggling to really look after this disease, knowing full well what the costs will be if they don't. They understand the implications, and they're working hard to manage that disease. And I've been very struck by I guess the depth of how strongly this affects families. I had a chance last year to talk to a young woman whose son was just diagnosed with diabetes just as he was entering primary, and her description of their sleepless nights and having to get up and check their blood levels at a regular time and constantly, their constant vigilance, their charting and recording every bit of food and exercise and always testing. It's a very, very overpowering thing, especially for a family newly diagnosed, somebody where they've got a child just diagnosed. They have a huge adjustment to make. And I can tell you they look to the technology around insulin pumps as a way to help them manage and a way to bring back a level of normalcy into their lives. And I think that that's very important for us not to forget. But again, I go back to the savings, and if we can help those people, all people, manage the disease better, we know that we're going to prevent some very serious complications in the future. Last year or the year before at the diabetes dinner that the MLAs were invited to, a young man in his 30s was speaking and talking about the difficulty, in fact the age that seems to be most difficult managing is early adulthood. And that's when young people leave home and they're at university or away, working, and they no longer have their parents helping them to manage it, and it's a time when often the disease goes out of control. And so there's a lot for us to learn about how and why insulin pumps would help a great deal. And we've heard people like George Canyon talk and lobby and advocate on behalf of diabetics, because he's also someone who has benefited from being able to afford an insulin pump. And we're here today really to call on the government to look at the passage of Bill 11, to call it for debate. We'd like to see that it is given the attention that it deserves, so that we can discuss here in the province whether or not this is a component of the good management of diabetes in Nova Scotia, and we believe it is. New Brunswick, who are referenced in our resolution today, the government in New Brunswick, despite having a $446 million deficit budget this year, they've just tabled that a week or so ago, in their budget, under the category of managing spending growth, and I think that's important to all members of the House, they see the introduction of insulin pumps, as their funding of insulin pumps, as a way to manage spending growth. So they've made the connection, they've connected the dots between providing insulin pumps to the people who need it and can't afford it or don't have private coverage, and seeing that they will ultimately have a reduction in spending needs in the healthcare area. So I think that's very important. They have actually included this as an investment in the comprehensive diabetes strategy, and they are focusing, they say in the Brunswick budget, on prevention, detection, and management of the disease, including the funding of insulin pumps. And we took a lot of comfort and a lot of excitement to see New Brunswick, our neighboring province, take that step, Madam Speaker. New Brunswick is now joining Newfoundland in the funding of insulin pumps. Statistics here in Nova Scotia, Madam Speaker, speak to the need, and they speak very loudly. Over 87,000 Nova Scotians have been diagnosed with diabetes. And I'd like at this point just to mention briefly about the obesity strategy that the minister mentioned during question period, and just make it very clear that that strategy does not affect the type 1 diabetics that we're talking about here, that are really the candidates for the insulin pump. That is a type 2 diabetic. It's a very different disease, and I don't think that it does a good service to the people who are struck with type 1 diabetes to suggest that obesity management would be the answer. So I just would like to make that point. The prevalence rate, to go back to some of the statistics in our province, the prevalence rate of this disease has increased in excess of 20% in the last 5 years here in Nova Scotia. And type 1 diabetes rates are rising 3 to 5% every year across the country. Sadly, Madam Speaker, the greatest rise is occurring in children aged 5 to 9. For young children, a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes requires constant monitoring, as I said, and it has a real interruption to lifestyle. I have the figures here on how many needles. It says on average 1,460 needles a year, 2,190 pokes to the finger a year to test blood sugars. It's very, very intrusive, Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker. I really have to get used to Madam Speaker. As I say, the cost to individuals is very high, and I hope that the minister will look very, very squarely at the cost to individuals who can't afford this, because it's the lucky ones that have it in their health plan or have the personal means or can make the personal sacrifices to find the money. It's an expensive proposition for an individual to make, and yet we're seeing families making tremendous sacrifices in order to be able to shoulder that financial burden and be able to get an insulin pump for their children. And what we'd like to suggest or even call on the government to look at is if you would call Bill 11, which was introduced today, and even consider amending it. If you don't want to pass a bill that would suggest that we look at all the candidates for insulin pumps and have them funded, perhaps we could start in some steps, some baby steps or some gradual phasing in that would start with children and start with those families that have no coverage for insulin pumps. If we could even do it in that way, the cost would be greatly mitigated. And this year alone, we're looking at costs that, yes. Well, thank you very much. I look forward to the other speakers.
I now recognize the Honourable Minister for Health and Wellness.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I thank the honourable member for bringing forward this, this particular item to the floor this evening for an opportunity to talk about, I think, an issue that is of great importance to all members in this House. I would imagine that all of the members here know someone living with diabetes, and in the debate we had last time on this this topic, I indicated that I certainly, in my own family, have people who are living with diabetes, and indeed children with type 1 diabetes, and I've known very many people in our community, and I related the story about a young single mom who did a field placement in my constituency office, my MLA office. And I want to reiterate the admiration that I have, particularly for families with children with type 1 diabetes and the challenges that they face, particularly around the diagnosis when that first occurs, and then all of the milestones in the lives of their children, you know, as they go to perhaps a daycare center, as they enter the school system, as they become young adults, and all of the challenges that pose in their teenage years. So I do very much recognize the added demands that living with diabetes will place on parents and on a family as they parent and as they support their children through the various stages of life. According to the Diabetes Care Program of Nova Scotia, we have 10% of the adult population in Nova Scotia living with diabetes, and this percentage increases to 25% of adults over the age of 75, 1 in 4. It indeed places a very heavy burden on our population and on our healthcare system and on the networks, the support networks. And there currently are estimated 750 children and youth with diabetes under the age of 19 in Nova Scotia, of which 35% are currently using pump therapy to manage their diabetes. And I recognize, and I think we all recognize, that insulin pumps are being used more and more for children with type 1 diabetes. You know, honourable members know that these devices are used to administer insulin. And I had an opportunity after the new year to meet with George Canyon, who I'm sure we're all great fans of, in terms of not only his music, but you know, what a great ambassador he is for our province. And as he said to myself and the Premier, although he resides in another province, he considers Nova Scotia his home, and he never misses an opportunity to make sure that people he meets knows that. And as you know, he is an ambassador for the Juvenile Diabetic Association, and we met with him and a representative from the manufacturer of insulin pumps to talk about the benefits that he has experienced as an individual who lives with diabetes, and what a great advantage it's been to him in terms of improving his lifestyle and helping him manage his disease. So I very much appreciated that opportunity. Nova Scotia is one of 6 provinces, perhaps 5 provinces now, with New Brunswick looking at covering insulin pumps. And I'm not entirely sure of how extensive their program is, but it's certainly something I will look into. Perhaps we can learn from them, particularly if they are initiating a program with a view to having it help them not only in terms of managing the disease, but improving the financial impact on their healthcare system. So that's certainly something that I will explore more fully. Staff in the Department of Health and Wellness and the Diabetes Care Program of Nova Scotia have been exploring insulin pump coverage, and they have completed a scan to determine the type and level of financial assistance being provided in other provinces. The program has consulted with stakeholders, including clinicians, subject matter experts, and patient families. And we do look very carefully at research on the clinical and the cost effectiveness of insulin pump therapy. And as yet, no decisions have been made, but certainly when decisions are made, they will be made on the basis of the clinical evidence. In these times, healthcare dollars are scarce, and because of the limited dollars available, we want to make sure that we are spending our money wisely, that we are getting a real benefit from the investments that we make in our healthcare system. And I understand that certainly for a certain group of patients with type 1 diabetes, there is a clinical value to having insulin pumps, and they can be cost effective. And so if the evidence is there, then this is the type of information that we are interested in learning about and making decisions based on. I want to acknowledge the Emily Fund, a registered Nova Scotia charity, and I want all members of this House to be aware of this fund if you're not already aware of this fund. It provides one-time financial assistance for children from our province and from PEI as well, who could benefit from the use of an insulin pump, but could not otherwise afford it. And I had correspondence from a spokesperson for this fund, and it's quite phenomenal the amount of money that they've not only raised but they've distributed in terms of helping children with type 1 diabetes get access to insulin pumps who otherwise would not have had access because their parents would not perhaps have had the means or a plan. And so this fund is there, and they have helped a very significant number of children in our province get access to insulin pumps. I want to say, though, that insulin pumps are only a small answer to a large and complex healthcare issue. In Nova Scotia, we have worked with healthcare partners to develop other answers, and we will continue to do that. We are near the top in Canada for rates of diabetes, and we have to do more on the prevention side as well as on the management side. And I'm pleased that the budget that was tabled yesterday does in fact have measures to deal with better management as well as moving in the direction of providing us with more opportunities to prevent this disease. So with those few remarks, I know that we could discuss this for a much longer time, and perhaps we'll have an opportunity to do that in the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I now recognize the honourable member from Argyle.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. It's my pleasure to stand and speak for a few moments on the resolution brought forward today during Opposition Day. This is Resolution 134. I want to thank a number of individuals in the gallery today who are sitting very attentively, listening very closely to the comments made by all members in this House, and understanding the importance of diabetic care in this province. But there's the issue that this is just an opposition resolution that really has no binding impact upon the decisions of government. It is still the NDP government that we see before us today that have to make a decision of one way or another on how they're going to move forward in supporting issues like insulin pumps for Nova Scotians. By any measure, diabetes is a significant and growing problem for Nova Scotians and for government. Nova Scotia has the second oldest population, the lowest median family income, the third highest rates for overweight and obesity. You might say that we have the perfect storm for diabetes. Our pre-diabetes prevalence is one of the highest in Canada. All of these risk factors may contribute to diabetes prevalence in the province that is higher than national average. 87,000 Nova Scotians were estimated to have diabetes in 2010. That number is expected to balloon to 125,000 by 2020. The Diabetic Care Program annual report tells us that 4,000 Nova Scotians were diagnosed with diabetes in 2009-2010 alone. The estimated cost of diabetes last year was this is astounding, $383 million, a figure that is expected to grow to $483 million over the next 10 years if it's left unchecked. That's a $100 million increase over 10 years. That's a huge financial problem for the Department of Health. People in Nova Scotia living with diabetes also face significant financial hardship. A Bedford woman was quoted in the Canadian Diabetes Association's recently released study entitled "Canada at the Tipping Point, Charting a New Path" as saying, and this is quotes, "There are too many times when I have to cut back on my daily testing because I cannot afford to buy testing strips. If I didn't have to test less, I'd be happier and better able to manage my condition. Nova Scotians with diabetes should not have to make the difficult choice that the Bedford woman says she is forced to make, a choice between financial security and good health. While we in this caucus should not usually urge the government to spend money, making the investment suggested by the Diabetic Association may now lead to significant savings in the future, Madam Speaker. By helping Nova Scotians with diabetes better manage their disease now, savings can be achieved by reducing the $36 million that is now being spent on the hospitalization of people with diabetes. I'm going to repeat that. $36 million is being spent on the hospitalization of people with diabetes. That's a huge number because of things getting out of hand with that disease. It's time for this government to act decisively to improve the health of thousands of Nova Scotians now and save the healthcare system hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future. I find it curious that in this government's speech from the throne contained the promise of over a dozen strategies, but there was no mention of a diabetic strategy, even though the diabetes care program is scheduled to expire, Madam Speaker, in 2012. It makes you wonder about this government's priorities. They make the choice to hike taxes and increase user fees in order to post an 11th hour surplus. But they don't invest in the future of health of an increasingly large section of our population. It's easy to contrast the actions of this government with the actions of the government in New Brunswick, as mentioned by the member for Halifax-Clayton Park. Despite tabling a budget that contained $448 million deficit, the New Brunswick government understood the financial and human costs associated with doing nothing with regard to diabetes. Like Nova Scotia, the burden of diabetes was growing in New Brunswick. Like Nova Scotia, the New Brunswick diabetes cost model found that both the cost and prevalence of diabetes in the province were at dramatically high levels and, if left unchecked, would continue to rise over the next decade. The difference between Nova Scotia's government and New Brunswick's government is that New Brunswick, they understand there is the cost of doing nothing, a cost in the form of more diagnosed cases of diabetes, sicker people with diabetes, more hospital stays, higher healthcare costs, and unfortunately more deaths due to diabetes. New Brunswick's government took the impact of diabetes seriously and made funding for insulin pumps and the other essential supplies available. The diabetes strategy also provides funds for monitoring and education measures, and it's a comprehensive strategy that earned kudos from the Diabetes Association. According to the Canadian Diabetes Association, insulin pumps are fast becoming a popular choice for people who want greater flexibility or an improvement in their blood glucose control. Many diabetic sufferers or diabetes sufferers who use an insulin pump report a better quality of life compared with those who use other devices for administering insulin. Insulin pumps make it possible to deliver more precise amounts of insulin than can be injected using a syringe. In fact, there are many advantages to the use of insulin pumps. For many people, however, the cost of that pump, even with insurance coverage, puts the devices out of reach. It is time that this government to deliver better care sooner to Nova Scotians with diabetes. It's time for this government to follow New Brunswick's lead, to take the impact of diabetes seriously and take real action to help those already living with diabetes and prevent more people from getting diabetes. It's time for this government to make a plan to combat diabetes and tackle the mounting costs of diabetes on people and on the province's finances. Madam Speaker, I do want to thank, for the many parents that have to spend so much time taking care of their children. I know as a parent of two young boys how much work that is. I can only just fathom just a little bit, just understand a little bit how it would be to take care of two children, let's say, with diabetes. And to see maybe the impact of an insulin pump on how to allow them to be able to live a more normal life, a life that maybe has a few less needles involved in it. If you look at being able to test, you're testing 8-10 times a day. and you're injecting 4, 5, 6 times a day insulin in order to have a normal insulin level over those periods of time. That takes just an incredible amount of work and dedication. And, you know, when you talk to individuals who had type 1 diabetes for very long periods of time, they talk about, you know, maybe having a normal life that includes sports, a normal life that includes going for sleepover, being able to really pay attention in school and being able to participate in the things that happen there, whether it's extracurricular or others. And the many people that we've had the opportunity to talk to who have gotten that pump, they can call it a life-changing experience. Madam Speaker, I've had the opportunity over the last couple of years to participate in the Junior Diabetes Research Foundation Ride for Life. And I've had a tremendous time participating in it. I think last year we were the only caucus to mount a team, and I'm hoping that with the interest that we've had in this legislature, the work that we're trying to do and the work that the Junior Diabetes Research Foundation is trying to do, that we have a team from at least each caucus, if not having a couple from each caucus, if at all possible. I know we'd have a harder time doing that than most of the caucuses, but we'll definitely try to do our best. Madam Speaker, this organization has done phenomenal things in moving the issue of diabetes forward and trying to find those supports, not only for the children, but for the families of those children in trying to regulate and try to modernize and try to normalize their lives. Madam Speaker, I think it's time that this government, you know, takes a second look at the possibility of a new program, a program that at the very least, provides some kind of insulin program, insulin pump program for at least children who deserve to have that life that most of our children do have the opportunity to enjoy. So, Madam Speaker, again, I want to thank everybody for bringing this. I thank the member from Halifax Clayton Park for bringing this resolution forward, and I look forward to further discussions as bills and things go forward in this House. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now recognize the honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and very pleased today to join in the debate on the resolution 134. This is first of all a topic, diabetes, that in one way or another has impacted on the lives of many of the MLAs and their families over the years. I know for myself, I became educated on diabetes, I guess probably 30-something years ago now, when my mother at age 59 was found by my sister in a diabetic coma. And she dramatically, of course, had to change the way she lived. And first of all, of course, adjusting to 2 needles a day. But she did take very, very good care of herself, and my dear mother lived to be 89. But we did see the ravages of diabetes as she had 2 amputations in her declining years. And so you know, from that coming here to the legislature over now 4 or 5 years, MLAs have had a wonderful opportunity to be educated about diabetes and the impact on Nova Scotia and the alarming rate that we have. But really importantly, what stands out for me is the education on the insulin pump. And I would challenge every member in the House to get out to the MLA diabetes dinner and evening. It's an outstanding education opportunity when families come as part of that evening and tell us about their experience with the pump, and families, of course, who cannot afford the pump and would love to have some assistance in what they are facing. I perhaps was most touched on one of those evenings when a family from Cape Breton brought their 3 children to the dinner, and again urging us to continue our fight with the previous government and with the current government to look at funding to some degree insulin pumps. And this family from Cape Breton, they had 3 children with diabetes. And from their time that they left Cape Breton till they made it here for the dinner at the Prince George, they had to make 2 stops at emergency departments along the way with their children having readings that were now at the dangerous level. And so, you know, it was a great opportunity to then hear what an insulin pump will do for a child and for a family. Over the last few days, as we talked about reintroducing this very, very important piece of legislation, and as you can see today, this is very, very nonpartisan. Members are paying attention to a very, very serious issue, and we hope that all members of the House will in fact encourage the Minister of Health and the Department to take a serious look at bringing Bill number 11. If they want to amend it, fine, but to start the coverage, at least for children under the age of 18. I have one letter here from a Natalie Brown, and she says about her son, Dylan, since having the insulin pump, the number of times we have had to go to the emergency room has lessened, his overall health has improved, his quality of life has improved, and we have had less doctor visits. And the healthcare system would definitely save money in both the short term and especially in the long term. I also had an email from Autumn Bell, who I don't think she's perhaps here today, but I know she's involved with the Halifax support group and work group on this issue. And she gave the same account of her son when he started to use the pump and how dramatically they had to visit the IWK substantially less. I know I want to recount one of those experiences where the before and after is very, very profoundly seen, and I think perhaps one of my colleagues, the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal, having been in school administration, probably identify with this, and perhaps other teachers here in the House as well, and that is having, you know, especially those early teen years, grades 7, 8, and 9, and having severe diabetic child in the school, and having to rely upon those days without a school nurse, having to get the guidance department to make sure that the child checked in at noontime to be tested before they had lunch. And I know as a vice principal, my job was immediately when the child didn't report during that noon hour was to hit the playground, hit the school areas to try and find this child, because parents had alerted us that, you know, he was a child that would need to make sure that he had his insulin during that noon period. And just as I was leaving school, the first child that I had encountered with an insulin pump came into our school, and what a dramatic difference it made in the lives of teachers and school administrators, as it reduced a lot of our stress. But to see that child go about his daily round in the school, you know, no matter what the activity, no matter what the time of day, no worry on school trips and so forth. And so it is a tremendously, you know, transforming and liberating time in the child's life when they are introduced to the insulin pump. Now, you know, we all know that government has choices and tough choices to make. And, you know, one of the ones that, again, the decision will take some time, perhaps, to see whether it has value or not. But, you know, government decided to buy a chip seal plant. And we know we can talk about the safety of our roads. $2.6 million on a chip seal plant, $6 million on a paving plant. You know, what a wonderful start that money put into an insulin pump program to get us off the ground here in Nova Scotia. So that's why, you know, we're calling on government to rethink this whole area. Yes, one of the things that the minister did bring up in her time on this resolution today was she mentioned that the Emily Fund, and currently we are told, according to the IDRF, that JDRF, I'm not familiar with that organization. Thank you. I will be now, yes. No, I saw this as an I, it was the printing here. But the Juvenile Diabetes Fund, getting a little ribbing here. But anyway, you know, that there just isn't money in that fund. There's no dollars available to assist. And, you know, in some ways, again, it's another appeal to charity. I'd rather look to what the Newfoundland government did. I'd like us to follow what the New Brunswick government has recently done, and they know that you know, that they have very serious financial challenges. But you know, this again must be seen as an investment, because the insulin pump allows for greater control of you know, type 1 diabetes and the kinds of impacts that it has on our health in the short term, and especially in the long term. When you consider that we're already at you know, 87,000 Nova Scotians that have diabetes, and that number in just 10 years going to move to 125,000 is really a frightening thought. It's going to add another $100 million to the care of these from childhood to seniors. So if we take some steps now and get insulin pumps into the program, the total program, as the minister alluded to, it is one of the measures, one of the tools that we should have.
Thank you. I now recognize the Opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Would you please call resolution number 8?
Resolution number 8. I now recognize the honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Madam Minister, and it's my first time seeing you in the chair, so welcome. And I will work hard to make sure I address you properly. I want to speak, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, to resolution number 8, and to the, in particular, to the therefore be it resolved. And there are two key words in that that I want to focus on. They are continue and they are opportunity. And speaking about the Reading Recovery Program, those words are critical. In correspondence that I sent to the minister, I asked her to reconsider her decision about continuing reading recovery. And the other key word is opportunity. We know that in our public schools, we currently have reading recovery across this province. And I'm pleased to see the minister back to hear the comments on this resolution. We have reading recovery in the province, and I want to remind all members of the House that reading recovery is there, has been there for a reason. No program survives from 1995 until the present without statistics which support the fact that it was successful. The minister would know, as a classroom teacher and others in the House, that there are many strategies that teachers use in order to help young students learn to read. Reading recovery has been found to be one of the best, and in fact, out of 153, it was the best. But it is only one particular strategy, program, whatever language you want to use, that helps young readers learn to read. And we know that students present themselves in various states of readiness. We also know that early intervention is what will translate into success for students learning to read. So there's no need to stand and argue the merits of reading recovery. What we're questioning is the opportunities that have been taken away if this minister continues to follow through on her decision to discontinue reading recovery. Many boards in the province have supplemented reading recovery with another literacy program. And that, I think, speaks to the fact that not all programs are designed for all students. But reading recovery is research-based, and it is focused on the lowest 20% in a grade 1 class. Now, the minister, I believe, made some of her decisions based on some statistics. And in the reading recovery program, students progress through a number of levels, but they only become a success statistic if they get to level 16. So there are many children in that who may not show up as a success statistic. But I would ask all members of this House, if a student comes in at a reading level 5 and finishes at a reading level 15, if that's not called success, I don't know what it is. There are classroom teachers and there are parents who are excited about that amount of success. But if you're only looking at statistics, the little Johnny who went from level 5 to level 15 will not be counted as a success statistic in reading recovery. So the people who are delivering the program, the parents who are involved and have children involved in that program, cannot understand why the opportunity, and I'm going back to that, therefore be it resolved, they cannot understand why the opportunity that helped their child move through various levels of reading success at grade 1 are going to have that opportunity taken away from them. And to think that a new program which can have equal or better than results in an early intervention one-on-one program coming from who knows where.
Order, please. Thank you. I'd like to remind all members that it's not acceptable to refer to any member as being present in the chamber or absent, so just be mindful of that. And I now recognize the Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and it's an honour to address you this afternoon. I'm pleased to rise today in response to this resolution. Having strong literacy skills is the foundation of success throughout life. We need to make sure our children have every opportunity to be successful. Improving the reading and writing skills for more of our students in the early grades is this government's goal. That's why the Department of Education is phasing out reading recovery and introducing an early literacy framework that will support more struggling readers in more grades, not just some of the lowest 20% in a single grade, grade 1. Madam Speaker, this will be an example of what we mean when we say we are putting children and learning first. Many people regard reading recovery as a good program, but it does not help every child who needs intervention. My whole issue with this is that this program is not equitable, and this has always caused me great concern. There are children who have the same level of need and are at the same reading level as students in reading recovery, but because of the limited number of spots available each year, they are left out. Reading recovery is a very structured, prescriptive program that requires children to be taken out of the classroom for a minimal amount of 30 minutes a day over the course of approximately 20 weeks. Students get some excellent one-on-one intervention outside of the classroom, but there is a trade-off. Missed hours of classroom time related to other areas of learning, such as missed math, social studies, music, and other happenings in the classroom. I believe there is a better way, an alternative way that will help more students receive the support they need as they learn to read and write. Madam Speaker, our new approach, which we will announce very shortly, will focus on using early literacy teachers who have a particular expertise in literacy development and support. These teachers will work with small groups, primarily within the classroom, and will work closely with the classroom teachers to sustain support for these children. There will also be one-on-one work with students when required. The program will be evidence-based and designed to be flexible to respond to the literacy development needs of our children. Understandably, people may be confused about the conflicting information regarding the success of the Reading Recovery Program. Sometimes children who start never finish because it is not working. Only the children who complete the program are captured in the data, which makes the success rate higher than is actually the case. Our review of student performance in the provincial early literacy assessment shows that we are not getting the outcomes we want for our students. Only 43% of Reading Recovery students are reading where we want them to be by the time they reach grade 3. That translates into something I said earlier, which means that 57% of the children captured in the data, those ones who successfully completed the program, are not at a reading level we want them to be in grade 3. They do not capture the children that were in the program that were discontinued without success. My commitment is an approach that is flexible and will meet the literacy needs of more children beginning in September. Madam Speaker, helping students learn and excel as readers and writers is critical to their lifelong success. As a former grade 1 teacher, I understand the value of early literacy development. But people don't need to be a grade 1 teacher or a former grade 1 teacher to understand. We all support children in their early literacy development. This government is committed to working with school boards to implement an early literacy approach that will meet the needs of more students, and we are going to have it begin in their primary year. Work is well underway, and we're very fortunate to have many highly trained teachers in this province who specialize in early literacy education. We have a framework in place, and staff from both the department and boards, along with classroom and literacy teachers, are continuing to collaborate to work out the details. Good teaching, along with parental support, is the key to success as children learn to read and write.
Order, please. I now recognize the honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to stand and speak to this resolution as well in regards to reading recovery. Thank you very much. The Minister of Transportation just made a wonderful comment, and I hope that he pays that off with maybe a few extra roads in my riding. Madam Speaker, reading recovery is one, and I spoke about this before, and I am going to read a little bit from my release of March 9th, and I think I'm quoting myself because I thought it was such a great quote that I thought I would do it. Madam Speaker, it's hard to believe that they're that interested in what I have to say. Nova Scotians must be asking themselves, is children literacy really the first place the NDP government should be looking to cut spending? You know, when this first started off, we were looking at the cutting of a program that from every information that anybody had was a relatively successful program in the people that it was touching, And when we finally found the rest of the detail was that, well, we're cutting the program, but we're going to create a new one for less money that's going to see more kids. Okay, well, I'm going to reserve comment on that really until such time that we have a program to truly see and understand. Madam Speaker, I have a child who in grade 1 went through the Reading Recovery Program. In the French program, and I forget the exact name of the program under French, but there you go. But it was Reading Recovery in the French program. And throughout his grade 1, he spent a half hour a day working with the interventionist or the teacher that was doing the work, and I did have the opportunity to participate in a number of the sessions with him. And I can tell you that Alex started off, and Alex, my guy today, he's 8 years old. He's now in grade 3. I can say that he struggled with reading. He wasn't really that interested in it, which is a stark contrast from his brother Audrey, who was reading early, who by the time he was probably in grade 1, grade 2, he was already reading English books, even though he had only been instructed or taught in French. So he was struggling along. He was getting that intervention, and he did succeed in the course, where he went from that level, that lower level, to a level 15, which did allow him to basically graduate from the program and move on. But to the minister's comment that many of these kids, as they move on in the system, might still get stuck along the way, and there's nothing for them. You know, truly there's nothing for them outside of producing an IPP, an individual program plan, where they're going to have to be read certain instructions, certain tests and things like that. And that is sort of where Alec got stuck. So it didn't necessarily serve him 100%. It helped him, but it didn't get him exactly where we need him. But I can say that today that through the hard work of his school teachers, the people around him, the resource teacher, that he's actually interested. He wants to go to the library. He wants to pick up books. He is getting things of a level 23 or 24 now, and actually succeeding in reading them. The Alex issue was not necessarily that he couldn't read. It was the fact that he couldn't put certain words together. He understood what they meant. He could read a book. Somebody could read it to him. He would understand everything. He'd be able to rename the characters. He would be able to rename the premise. It was everything. He had everything except for that. Being able to stand in front of you and say, the NDP are spending money. That's where he was stuck. But today he's succeeding very, very well with it. So we're going to reserve our comment on what that new program is going to be, because there is only 5 months to go. This is not a lot of time to be able to pull this together, to be able to be ready in September. I'm going to take the minister's word at its word, that she is going to have the department ready, the school boards are going to be ready, the school teachers are going to be ready. But after that, I think it will be our issue to say it's working or it's not working from the people that we talk to every day, that work in our school system, that teach our kids, that deserve every bit of service that they can have. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this today.
Thank you. I now recognize the official leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Again, I'll join in with everyone welcoming you to the chair. It's my first time to have an opportunity to address the House in your presence, so congratulations on your appointment. I want to speak to resolution number 8. I had the opportunity and privilege to travel across the province over the last number of months, talking to school boards, parents, students who have had the opportunity to participate in reading recovery, and hearing about the true value of the program. And more importantly, listening to not only the parents but the young Nova Scotians talking about the new lease on life they have around this reading recovery program. And Madam Chair, I must confess at the very beginning, I can tell you there isn't a single school board, there isn't a single school board representative or a single parent that would tell you that reading recovery answers all the challenges facing Nova Scotians, young Nova Scotians who have literacy challenges. But what they will all tell you is that it is the foundation that they build from to create programs. There are school boards across this province who have recognized that reading recovery was not addressing the needs of every student. They recognize that as some students bridged out of grade 1 into grade 2 and 3, they still needed supports. But what those boards were doing was building a foundation around, we're building programs around the foundation of reading recovery. A program that has evidence-based, one that there isn't a jurisdiction that across North America that tells you it is not effective, it's not working. Madam Speaker, when I had an opportunity in this very school board, they talked about in one school that a large portion of their student population needed reading recovery, a large percentage, much more than 20%. Well, Madam Chair, what the school board has done is that they have reached into the supplementary funding that they had set aside, and put extra funding into reading recovery to ensure that all of the students were getting a chance to get the first-hand experience of the one-on-one success of reading recovery. What is frightening parents and what is frightening, I think, communities and school board members across this province is that we are removing a program that actually has proven results, one that has been reviewed for the last 15 years in this province and has been reviewed in North America and in Europe on its successes. And we're replacing it with a program that doesn't exist today. The minister mentioned in her remarks that it's going to be evidence-based. Well, Madam Speaker, that's just simply impossible. It can't happen. You know, what we've encouraged the minister to do is if she believes that the reading recovery is not fulfilling what we believe the mandate is, if she believes there's a new program out there that they're going to create in 5 months, then what they should be doing is running parallel programs and comparing them. And then at the end of the day, the people in the Department of Education will be able to make the assessment based on evidence, not based on a feeling they might have. And if they reach out and actually talk to members of school boards who across this province who are recognizing that in order to ensure that every student gets an opportunity to meet their full potential, they are adding on to the reading recovery program. They are not replacing it, they are adding on to it. And earlier in her remarks, she talked about collaboration. Well, I would suggest that collaboration means you're working with somebody. And if she wants to work with school boards who across this province almost unanimously have said they want to keep reading recovery, I would encourage the minister to give them that opportunity. It's $3,000 roughly in every board. If you want to add to that program and do a supplement, an addition to, that's wonderful. That's what boards are already doing. Work with them. Collaboration means you are working together. What has happened is we've unilaterally removed a successful program out of the education system in this province. Madam Speaker, thank you.
Thank you. The time has elapsed for this resolution. I now call the Opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. That completes the Opposition Liberal business for today, and I would defer to the Government Deputy House Leader to give us tomorrow's hours of business. Yeah.
Thank you. I now recognize the Government Deputy House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I would like to thank the Opposition House Leader. Tomorrow, after daily routine and question period, the government will be calling Bill 7, and Bill 7 is an act respecting the administration of justice. And if time allows, there will be a resumption of speech in reply. I now move that the House do rise to meet again at the hour of 2 o'clock tomorrow, and the House hours will be from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The motion before us is the House does now rise and meet again tomorrow from between the hours of 2 to 6. All in favour? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We are now at the point of the hour of interruption, and at this point a motion has been submitted by the member from Pictou East, and it reads, therefore be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly recognize and congratulate this government for honouring its commitment to making life better for families in Nova Scotia. I now recognize the member from the honourable member from Pictou East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What a pleasure it is for me to rise in the House and speak on the resolution before us tonight. Because, Madam Speaker, for the last 20 months, the lives of Nova Scotians have been made better. In very difficult times, the lives of Nova Scotians have been made better. And Madam Speaker, in relationship to the last 3 days, the lives of Nova Scotians have been changed fundamentally for the better. On Monday, the Premier went through a checklist, Madam Speaker, of the promises made in the election campaign. And that checklist was very substantial. It was overshadowed somewhat by the fact that at the same time he announced a $447 million surplus for last year. A $447 million surplus for last year. And the fact that only 7 times in the last 50 years have we been paying down the debt. So I think that is a very substantive Monday evening. On Tuesday, we had a budget delivered in this House. A budget was delivered in this House that contained many new initiatives, also in difficult times. A lot of new initiatives. And today, we had the Minister of Health and Wellness come before us and talk about the establishment of the first of 4 collaborative emergency centers in this province, in Parsbro. That is a major, major accomplishment. Now, Madam Speaker, we have also dealt with so many issues in relationship to health. And I only have 10 minutes here to speak tonight. So I want to talk about a few things that are happening in Pictou County as well. But I'll intersperse what's happening across the province with what is happening in Pictou County. But I do want to mention the fact that we will have additional nurse practitioners in this province, that the 811 nurse line is going to receive more funding and more importance. And I have had the opportunity for family members to comment to me on how good this service is, because it has been used by family and friends, and it has been a great service in this province. My constituency assistant used it on an occasion and got tremendous results as well. So I want to deal with some of the issues in Pictou County as well that are of great importance and certainly helping the lives of Pictonians. And I would be remiss if I didn't have a few comments about Pictou County. But all 3 members from Pictou County were very excited yesterday to have in the budget $2.6 million, which is only the start. And I sort of take exception with the headline in the local paper today, ER funding figure less than expected. Well, this is a project that was estimated at over $16 million, and you can't begin and end the construction in 1 year. And we know that this $2.6 million is only the beginning of this project, and that it will go through to completion, and we will have that ER up and running in a reasonable period of time. Now, I want to comment on the minister. The minister was in that ER last summer on a very hot day and saw the need that existed. And she personally was moved by the congestion that there was there, and the number of people that were in stretchers in the ER and so on. And this is something that the 3 members from Pictou County have worked very, very hard to bring to fruition. And I'm very proud that it was in the speech from the throne and that it was also in the budget. Now, jobs here is something that I could talk about at great length as well. And that's an initiative that is helping a lot of people around the province of Nova Scotia. And the thrust of jobs here, learning the right skills for good jobs, $28 million. We have many aspects of that, but growing the economy through innovation, $22.9 million, and helping businesses be more competitive globally, $2.15 million. And those are just